Hey, Cypher here. Today we're going to talk about how the Wizard of Oz might have a secret message about currency in it. Since the late 60s, historians and economists have been reinterpreting the Wizard of Oz. Written in 1900, it was really popular, and in 1902, it was adapted to play. The 1930s version that we're all very fond of was only the second Hollywood production of it. There was a lot of influence on L. Frank Baum, who wrote the book. Some even argue that the book itself is an allegory for the biggest argument of the time. Now, the Populist Party, by 1900, had pretty much failed to be elected. William Jennings Bryan, their presidential candidate, didn't get elected. And he wouldn't get elected ever, though trying vociferously. The Populists were virtually dead, making room for the Progressives who would take over in the early 20th century. But for a time in the late 19th century, they were the most powerful third party to ever grace the United States. One of the strongest things that they advocated was for a bimetallic system. From 1787 to 1873, the U.S. had actually based its currency on silver and gold. By 1873, it was 16 ounces of silver were equal to 1 ounce of gold. But in what some call the crime of 1873, the U.S. changed over to a completely gold standard. Now, us today, we're not used to a gold standard or a silver standard of any sort because our currency is based on imagination. Nixon eliminated the gold standard completely from our system of currency. But at the turn of the century, it was based on gold and gold alone. Now, many of the populists really didn't like this gold standard. Bryan himself said, "You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." They thought that the gold standard caused inflation, and possibly the Depression of 1894. So the populists pushed to go back to the 16-to-1 standard. So the theory goes that the Wonderful Wizard of Oz is actually an allegory for this debate. The name itself could simply be an abbreviation for ounces, OZ, ounces. The Golden Road is obviously an allegory for gold, and the Emerald City is obviously an allegory for the greenbacks, which would represent that gold. But what about the silver? Well, there's a trick to that. You see, Dorothy didn't actually wear ruby slippers in the book. She wore silver slippers. So she walked along the Golden Road to the Emerald City wearing silver slippers. This whole thing can actually get pretty deep, so if you want to learn more about it, there's links in the description to more information. Other examples in the book could be the Wicked Witch of the West. She could represent the trusts, and how to get rid of them, by dissolving them. Otherwise known as trust busting. The wizard behind the curtain could be President McKinley himself, and the cyclone could equal revolution. But the most compelling and important part of the story, Dorothy, she could actually just represent every American. The whole theory makes for great analysis of bimetalism. Unfortunately, it's probably not a very good theory. Baum was a fierce Republican and an editor of a newspaper. He would have proclaimed bimetalism if he truly advocated it. The theory was proposed in 1964 by a high school social studies teacher by the name of Henry Littlefield. If you want to read his article, it's in the description, though I gotta warn you, there's a lot of problems with it. But the whole theory's been polished up. Many economists and historians have weighed in on the argument. The problem is, nobody thought of it at the time. It took until 1964 for anybody to think that this was actually the case. But perhaps the interpretation is not up to the artist. I don't think so. But that's aesthetic theory, and that should be left for another episode. If you like what I had to say, subscribe below, and there'll be a lot to come. I'll see you next time.